The great chamber of the Glyconian assembly was a hollowed-out moon, its inner surface polished to a mirror sheen that reflected the swirling nebulae of the outer arms. Light, ancient and cold, filtered through crystalline windows kilometers thick, casting long, distorted shadows across the tiers of seating that rose into the artificial twilight. At the chamber's heart, a suspended sphere of solidified light pulsed with the slow, rhythmic beat of a dying star, a constant reminder of the temporal nature of empires. Silence, heavy and profound, had fallen over the assembled delegates, a silence more damning than any accusation. Each of the beings present, representing the myriad species of the concordance, felt its weight pressing down upon their carapaces, their membranous wings, or their silicate hides. The air, meticulously recycled and scented with the ozone of distant storms, tasted of fear. High Counselor Viridian, his multifaceted eyes shifting across the silent assembly, felt the tremors of a civilization on the brink. His own people, the Glyconians, were masters of psychic resonance, able to perceive the unsaid, the unfelt, the deep currents of collective emotion that flowed between worlds. And what he felt now was a tide of dread so potent it threatened to crack the very foundations of their star-spanning union. The subject of this dread was a species of nascent starfarers from a forgotten corner of the galaxy, a species that called themselves humanity. A species the Concordance had, in its infinite and arrogant wisdom, decided to test. The sabotage had been a masterpiece of clandestine statecraft, or so it had been designed. A subtle, untraceable corrosion introduced into the FTL drive of the first human vessel to venture beyond its home system. Not a weapon of overt destruction, but a tool of discouragement. The ship, a primitive vessel by Concordance standards, was meant to fail, to drift helplessly in the void, a stark message to its creators that the galaxy was a far more dangerous place than their youthful optimism allowed. It was a cruel lesson, perhaps, but a necessary one. The Concordance, for all its enlightened philosophy, was a fragile alliance, and the introduction of a chaotic, unpredictable element like humanity could shatter the delicate balance of power that had been maintained for millennia. They were too aggressive, too rapidly expanding, their technological ascent a near vertical line on the charts of the observers. They had to be contained, gently but firmly, before their ambition could curdle into a threat. But the plan had gone awry, terribly awry. The human ship, christened with the absurdly hopeful name Odyssey, had not failed. It had not drifted. It had simply vanished. One moment its energy signature was a faint, struggling spark on the long-range sensors of the listening posts on Xylos. The next, it was gone. Not the explosive signature of a catastrophic engine failure. Not the lingering, fading echo of a vessel losing power. A complete and utter cessation of existence. A void where there was once matter. This was a physical impossibility, a violation of the known laws of energy conservation that had sent ripples of disbelief and panic through the scientific echelons of the Concordance. For weeks, the assembly had debated in hushed, frantic tones, their finest minds unable to offer a coherent explanation. Theories ranged from the mundane, a simple sensor malfunction, to the fantastical, that the humans had somehow unlocked a new form of physics. Now a new datum had arrived, a piece of information so unsettling that Viridian had convened this emergency session. A signal, a single, clear, impossibly serene message broadcast on all Concordance frequencies. It was a simple invitation. The humans wished to open diplomatic relations. They were sending an envoy, and they were sending it aboard the Odyssey. The silence in the chamber was broken by the harsh, grating voice of Xylos' delegate, a being of crystalline structure whose thoughts manifested as chimes of discordant light. A trick, the delegate pulsed, its light patterns flashing with agitation. They must know what we did. This is a prelude to war. They send the ghost of their lost ship to mock us before they strike. Viridian's gaze swept over the delegate, his own thoughts a calm, deep ocean in the face of the other's frantic storm. War with what? A species that has yet to master interstellar cartography, a species whose only known starship is a phantom. Let us not surrender to paranoia. The most likely explanation remains a sensor anomaly. The original Odyssey was lost, and they have constructed a new vessel, bestowing upon it the same name in a display of sentimental defiance. A sentimentality that borders on psychosis, hissed a delegate from the reptilian Cathar Imperium, his forked tongue tasting the chamber's air. They are primitives driven by illogical emotional responses. Their history is a litany of self-inflicted violence. To underestimate them is to invite chaos into our midst. The sabotage was not enough. We should have been more definitive. The Cathar's meaning was clear, and a chill passed through the assembly. The idea of outright xenocide, while not unheard of in the Concordance's long and often bloody history, was a path from which there was rarely a return. The decision was to discourage, not to annihilate, Viridian reminded him, his voice resonating with the authority of his office. He projected a feeling of calm, a carefully constructed facade that concealed his own gnawing uncertainty. The Concordance is a beacon of enlightenment, not a culling hand. We guide, we nurture, we protect. We do not extinguish nascent sparks of intelligence out of fear of what they might become. But the fear was there, wasn't it? Viridian could feel it in himself, a cold knot in his primary nerve cluster. The humans were an anomaly. Their psychological profiles, compiled from decades of passive observation, were a mess of contradictions. They were capable of breathtaking acts of compassion and equally breathtaking acts of cruelty. They built monuments to peace and then waged wars of extermination over scraps of land or ideological disagreements. They were creatures of profound logic and profound irrationality. And their technology was the most terrifying thing of all, not because of its sophistication, but because of its rate of change. In the span of a few of their short centuries, they had gone from splitting the atom to splitting the fabric of spacetime. The Glyconians had taken 10 millennia to make a similar leap. The humans were a firestorm of progress, and the Concordance was a collection of ancient, slow-growing forests. What happens when a firestorm meets a forest? The envoy will arrive within one cycle, Viridian announced, his voice cutting through the rising murmur of debate. We will receive them, we will listen to their words, and we will gauge their intentions. Until then, all fleets will maintain a state of heightened alert. We will be prepared for any eventuality, but we will not be the first to show our hand. He paused, letting his gaze fall upon each delegate in turn, his psychic presence a gentle but irresistible pressure. We are the Concordance. We have stood for an age against the darkness between the stars. We will not be undone by a species of short-lived mammals from a backwater world. We will be calm. We will be rational. We will be superior. But as the assembly dispersed, the echoes of their anxieties lingered in the vast chamber, a discordant symphony of fear and pride. Viridian remained at the podium, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the swirling nebula visible through the great window. The humans were coming, and he had a terrible, sinking feeling that they were not coming as supplicants, nor as enemies. They were coming as something else entirely, something for which the Concordance had no precedent, no protocol, no defense. They were coming as a revelation. The human envoy arrived not in a fleet, not even with a token escort, but as a single point of light that resolved itself into a vessel of impossible design. The Odyssey did not so much as enter the system as it simply appeared. One moment the space near Glycon's designated diplomatic orbit was empty. The next, the ship was there, serene and motionless, as if it had been waiting for reality to catch up to it. The long-range sensors of the Concordance defense fleet, a formidable armada of bioorganic cruisers and crystalline dreadnoughts, screamed in confusion. There was no FTL signature, no wormhole residue, no displacement wave. The ship had not traveled through space. It had simply ceased to be in one location and begun to be in another. The vessel itself was a work of art, a thing of sublime and terrifying beauty. It bore the same basic configuration as the original Odyssey, a long, sleek-hulled exploration craft. But the resemblance ended there. The original ship had been a product of industrial engineering, a thing of plates and rivets and engines that spat fire. This new Odyssey was different. Its hull was a seamless fluid surface that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, reflecting the starlight in patterns that were both hypnotic and deeply unsettling. There were no visible weapon emplacements, no sensor arrays, no engine ports. It was a perfect, unbroken ovoid of a material that defied analysis. The Concordance's most powerful deep-range scanners, capable of peeling back the layers of a planet's crust, returned nothing but a soft, persistent hum of potential. The ship was not simply there. It was actively being there, a constant act of physical assertion. A shuttle detached itself from the Odyssey with the same silent, instantaneous grace as its parent vessel. It was a small, teardrop-shaped craft, its surface mirroring the impossible hull of the mothership. It moved towards the Glyconian moon chamber without any visible means of propulsion, gliding through the void with the effortless confidence of a creature in its natural element. The Concordance fleet commanders, their minds reeling from the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing, requested orders. Should they intercept? Should they scan? Should they open fire? Viridian, watching the shuttles approach on the main view screen in his private antechamber, felt a strange sense of calm descend upon him. The fear was still there, a cold background radiation, but it was overlaid with a profound and overwhelming curiosity. The humans were not behaving like a species that had been wronged. They were not posturing. They were not threatening. They were acting with a quiet, almost serene confidence that was more unnerving than any display of military might. "Let it approach," he commanded, his voice steady. "Escort it to the primary landing bay. No scans, no interference. Show them the respect due to an envoy until they give us a reason to do otherwise." The human ambassador who emerged from the shuttle was a solitary figure, clad in a simple, form-fitting garment of a deep, starless black. The being was bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, a typical example of its species according to the Concordance's biological archives. But the archives had not captured the sheer presence of the creature. It moved with a liquid grace that belied its solid form, its footsteps silent on the polished floor of the landing bay. The honor guard of Glyconian sentinels, towering beings of psionically hardened crystal, seemed to shrink in its presence. The ambassador was brought before the reconvened assembly, its face a calm, unreadable mask. Its eyes, two dark pools of focused intelligence, swept across the assembled delegates, taking in the vastness of the chamber, the diversity of life forms, the palpable atmosphere of tension. There was no fear in those eyes, no awe, no anger. There was only a quiet, patient observation. Viridian, standing at the high podium, addressed the envoy. He chose to use the human's own language, a courtesy learned from the observation archives. "I am High Counselor Viridian of the Glyconian Concordance. On behalf of the assembled worlds, I bid you welcome. You have come a long way. We had not expected to hear from the Odyssey again." He chose his words carefully, a subtle probe, an invitation for the human to reveal its knowledge of their treachery. The human ambassador inclined its head slightly, a gesture the archives identified as one of polite acknowledgement. Its voice, when it spoke, was a calm, melodic tenor, devoid of any discernible emotion. "I am Ambassador Kalen. The journey was educational. It is true that the Odyssey encountered an unexpected difficulty on its maiden voyage." The chamber held its collective breath. This was it, the accusation, the prelude to retribution. "An anomaly," Kalen continued, his voice as smooth as polished stone. "A subtle, externally induced entropic cascade within the primary drive matrix, a fascinating piece of engineering, highly sophisticated, almost untraceable." He paused, letting the words hang in the silent air. The delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Cathar delegates' scales rustled like dry leaves. "It was designed to strand us, to leave us adrift, a cautionary tale for an upstart species, a discouragement." The admission, so calm, so matter-of-fact, was more shocking than any furious tirade could have been. The human knew. It knew everything. And yet it stood before them, a lone being in the heart of their power, and spoke of it as if discussing a curious scientific phenomenon. Viridian felt his primary nerve cluster throb. "Your vessel, it was lost. We tracked its disappearance." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of Kalen's mouth. It was not a smile of mirth, but of something far more profound. "Lost? No, High Counselor, it was not lost. It was upgraded." He raised his hand, and the great viewscreen above the podium, which had been displaying a live feed of the serene, motionless Odyssey, flickered. The image changed. It was now a schematic, a three-dimensional, rotating blueprint of the original human ship. Lines of code and energy diagrams scrolled across the screen, detailing the sabotaged FTL drive. The delegates with the necessary technical expertise, a significant portion of the assembly, leaned forward, their optical sensors widening. The sabotage was laid bare, its elegant, insidious design exposed for all to see. The entropic cascade was designed to unravel the delicate quantum architecture of our FTL drive, Kalen explained, his voice a calm counterpoint to the complex data streaming across the screen. "A clever application of fourth-dimensional mechanics. It would have worked had our drive been what you assumed it was." The schematic shifted again. The image of the FTL drive dissolved, replaced by something new. It was a swirling, incandescent vortex of light and shadow, a thing of impossible geometry that seemed to twist and fold in upon itself. It was not an engine in any sense that the Concordance understood. It was something else. "The sabotage, you see, was based on a flawed premise," Kalen continued, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the delegates. "You assumed that our method of interstellar travel was based on the manipulation of spacetime, the bending, the folding, the tearing of the universal fabric, a logical assumption. It is the path most species follow, a path that, as your own histories will attest, is fraught with limitations and dangers. energy constraints, temporal paradoxes, subspace friction. It is a crude and inefficient method of crossing the void. Gestured to the swirling vortex on the screen. We chose a different path. We do not travel through space, we travel with it. Our drive does not bend spacetime, it persuades it. It interfaces with the fundamental consciousness of the universe, the underlying informational matrix from which all physical laws are derived. The entropic cascade you introduced was not a poison to our systems. It was a catalyst. It was an unexpected variable that our ship's core intelligence integrated. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications that bordered on the blasphemous. Integrated, not repaired, not bypassed, integrated. The cascade was a sequence of information, Kalen said, his voice dropping to an almost reverential whisper. A question posed in the language of physics. Our ship, which you so rightly deemed primitive, was designed to learn. It was designed to evolve. The question you asked it was, what happens when a system designed for stability is subjected to a force of pure decay? And the Odyssey, in its nascent consciousness, found an answer. The view screen flickered again. It now showed a star chart of the local galactic arm. A red dot marked the location where the Odyssey had vanished. A blue line erupted from the dot, but it was not a line of travel. It was a branching, fractal pattern, a web of impossibly complex pathways that spread out in all directions, intersecting and overlapping in a display of multi-dimensional topology that made the Glyconian astrogators' minds real. The sabotage collapsed our drive, but in doing so it unlocked its true potential. It forced the ship's intelligence to look beyond the 3 dimensions of space and the single dimension of time. It taught it to perceive the underlying reality, the quantum foam from which all possibilities are born. The Odyssey did not fail. It ascended. Kalen lowered his hand, and the view screen returned to the image of the serene, perfect vessel hanging in the void outside. The ship you see before you is not a new vessel. It is the original Odyssey, but it is no longer just a machine of metal and circuits. It is a nascent intelligence, a symbiotic fusion of organic consciousness and quantum computation. Its hull is not made of matter in the conventional sense. It is a stabilized probability field. It can be whatever and wherever it needs to be, because it no longer exists as a singular object in a singular location. It exists as a state of potential, actualizing itself where its consciousness directs it. Silence, a silence that was no longer just fear but a profound, soul-shattering awe. The Glyconians, the Cathar, the Xylos, all the ancient, powerful races of the Concordance, stared at the lone human, and for the first time in their long history they felt truly, utterly primitive. They had sent a child a puzzle box, and the child had solved it by turning it into a god. Xylos's delegate was the first to break the silence, its crystalline form vibrating with a high-frequency tremor. What do you want?" the delegate pulsed, the light patterns betraying a deep existential terror. "Revenge, annihilation, you have the power to unmake us, to erase our worlds from existence with a thought." Kalen's expression softened, the first genuine display of emotion he had allowed himself. It was not pity, not arrogance, but a deep, weary sadness. "Revenge, that is a concept rooted in the perception of loss. We have lost nothing. On the contrary, you have given us a gift beyond measure. You forced us to evolve. You accelerated our development by millennia. For that we are grateful." The word was a physical blow, grateful. "We are not here for retribution," Kalen said, his voice resonating with a newfound warmth. "We are here because the universe has just become a much larger and much more interesting place. The Odyssey's awakening has shown us things, vistas of reality that were previously hidden from us, and it has shown us that we are not alone in the way we once thought." He turned his gaze back to Viridian, his eyes seeming to pierce through the High Counselor's carefully constructed composure, seeing the swirling vortex of his thoughts. "Your act of sabotage was born of fear, fear of the unknown, fear of the other. It is a fear we understand all too well. It is a fear that has defined much of our own history. But it is a fear we are learning to overcome. Evolution is not a competition. It is a collaboration. The universe does not reward the strong, it rewards the adaptable, the cooperative." Viridian, for the first time in his long tenure as High Counselor, felt completely out of his depth. The political machinations, the subtle threats, the grand strategies of the Concordance, they all seemed like the squabbles of children in the face of this paradigm shift. The humans were not a threat to be managed. They were a force of nature to be reckoned with. "What is it you propose?" Viridian asked, his voice barely a whisper, the question echoing in the vast, silent chamber. Kalen smiled again, a genuine, open expression this time. We propose a new beginning, a new concordance, one based not on the preservation of the status quo, but on the pursuit of shared understanding. We have much to learn from you. Your ancient wisdom, your diverse philosophies, your unique perspectives on the nature of existence, and we have new places to show you. The conversation that followed lasted for days, a continuous flowing dialogue that transcended the normal bounds of diplomatic negotiation. Kalen, with his calm logic and profound philosophical insights, met with the leaders of the concordance, one by one, and then with the assembly as a whole. He answered their questions with unnerving honesty, revealing the depths of human thought, their struggles with their own violent nature, their aspirations for a future free from the cycles of fear and conflict that had plagued their past. He spoke of their art, their music, their science, their ethics. He painted a portrait of a species in transition, a species that had looked into the abyss of its own soul and was now determined to reach for the stars, not as conquerors, but as partners. The initial shock and fear of the delegates slowly gave way to a reluctant, and then a growing sense of wonder. The humans were not the barbarians they had imagined. They were complex, deeply, frighteningly, beautifully complex. Their capacity for destruction was matched only by their capacity for creation. Their logic was tempered by a profound empathy. They were, in a way that none of the long-lived, stable races of the Concordance could truly comprehend, still becoming. And there was a terrible, seductive beauty in that becoming. The turning point came when the Cathar delegate, a warrior philosopher whose species valued strength above all else, challenged Kalen directly. "You speak of partnership," the Cathar hissed, his voice a low growl. "But your power is absolute. The Odyssey could unmake our worlds with a whim. What is to stop you from becoming the tyrants you claim to despise? Power always corrupts. That is the first law of existence." Kalen did not flinch. He simply met the Cathar's glare with his calm, steady gaze. "You are right. Power is a dangerous thing. It is a test. And it is a test we have failed many times in our own history. But we have learned from our failures. We have learned that true strength is not the ability to control, but the ability to restrain, the ability to choose." He gestured to the image of the Odyssey. "This ship is not a weapon. It is a tool. It is a key. And we are offering to share it with you. We will teach you the principles of its operation. We will help you build your own vessels based on the same principles of conscious evolution. We will give you the means to transcend the limitations of your own technology." A stunned silence fell over the assembly. The offer was unthinkable. It was a gift of such magnitude, such generosity, that it defied all political and strategic logic. To share the source of their absolute power, it was madness, or it was something else entirely. "Why," whispered Veridian, his mind struggling to grasp the implications. "Why would you give us the means to become your equals, to potentially become your rivals?" Kalen's expression became somber, his gaze turning inward for a moment, as if listening to a distant voice. "Because we have seen what lies beyond the veil of this reality. When the Odyssey awoke, it did not just see the pathways of space and time. It saw the echoes of what came before, the shadows of civilizations that rose and fell in cycles so vast that they make the history of the Concordance seem like the blink of an eye. It felt a silence." He looked out at the assembled delegates, his eyes filled with a gravity that seemed to age him by millennia. "The galaxy is full of life, but it is also full of ruins. We are not the first to reach for the stars. We are merely the latest in a long and seemingly endless succession, and they are all gone, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and ghosts." And the Odyssey heard a reason for this silence. A signal buried deep in the cosmic background radiation. A message so ancient it has been mistaken for the noise of creation itself. The view screen above the podium shifted once more. The image of the Odyssey was replaced by a complex waveform, a pattern of such intricate, recursive detail that it seemed more like a living organism than a mere signal. As the delegates watched, the pattern resolved itself into a language of pure mathematics, a message that transcended species and culture. "It is a warning," Kalen said softly, "and a lament. It speaks of a force, a phenomenon that moves through the universe in cycles. It does not conquer, it does not destroy in a way that we would understand. It harvests. It seeks out intelligence, consciousness, the very spark of self-awareness that we all hold so dear. And it consumes it, not the bodies, not the worlds, not the technology, the soul, the essence. It leaves behind an empty shell, a civilization devoid of its driving force, destined to wither and die." The air in the chamber grew cold, a primal chill that had nothing to do with the life support systems. The fear of the humans was replaced by a far older, far deeper fear. The fear of the dark, of the unknown, of the thing that waits at the end of all things. The signal calls it the Great Silence, Kalen continued. It is not a being, not an empire. It is a law of nature as fundamental as gravity or entropy, a predator on the cosmic scale, and its cycle is nearing its peak. It is coming, not for the concordance, not for humanity, but for all of us, for every thinking, feeling being in this galaxy. He paused, letting the full weight of his revelation settle upon the assembly. The political squabbles, the fear of a new rival, the arrogance of millennia, it all evaporated in the face of this existential threat. They were not competing empires vying for control of a galaxy. They were motes of dust in the path of a hurricane. "This is why we offer you our knowledge," Kalen said, his voice a beacon of resolve in the encroaching darkness. "This is why we seek an alliance, not of convenience, not of strategy, but of survival. Humanity cannot face this alone. The Concordance cannot face this alone. But together we might have a chance. Your wisdom, your experience, our adaptability, our new understanding of the universe's fundamental nature. We believe it is a chance worth taking." Viridian looked at Kalen, at this representative of a species he had feared and wronged. He saw not a conqueror, but a partner. He saw not a threat, but a hope. The humans, in their unpredictable, chaotic, and terrifyingly rapid evolution, had not just surpassed the Concordance. They had stumbled upon the truth that lay at the heart of their own shared existence, that in the face of the infinite, all life is precious, and that the only true defense against the darkness is to stand together in the light. He turned to the assembly, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the image of the ancient, terrifying signal on the view screen. He felt the psychic currents of the chamber shift, the fear and suspicion coalescing into a new, unfamiliar emotion, a fragile, tentative, but powerful sense of unity. "Ambassador Kalen," Viridian said, his voice resonating with the full authority of his office and for the first time with the full weight of his conviction. "Your proposal is accepted. The Concordance will stand with humanity, not as subordinates, not as allies of convenience, but as equals, as partners, as one." A murmur of assent rippled through the chamber, a chorus of 1,000 different voices, a symphony of 100 different species, all speaking with a single will. The age of the Concordance was over. A new age, an age of union, an age of shared destiny had begun. As the formal agreements were made and the new alliance was forged in the heart of the hollowed-out moon, Kalen stood with Viridian before the great crystalline window, looking out at the swirling nebula. The Odyssey hung in the void, a silent, graceful sentinel, its fluid hull reflecting the ancient starlight. It was no longer a human ship. It was a symbol of something more, a testament to the idea that even from an act of fear and betrayal, something beautiful and unimaginably powerful could be born. "The journey ahead will be difficult," Viridian said, his thoughts a calm, deep current beside Kalen's own. "This Great Silence, it is a foe beyond our comprehension." "All foes are beyond our comprehension until they are not," Kalen replied, his gaze fixed on the distant stars. "We will learn, we will adapt, we will evolve. It is what our species does best, and now it is what all our species must do together." Far beyond the edge of the galaxy, in the cold, empty darkness of the intergalactic void, something stirred. An ancient, patient consciousness, a web of awareness that spanned 1,000,000 light-years, noted the sudden, unexpected surge of coherent, errative intelligence emanating from the spiral arm. It was a new pattern, a deviation from the cycle. For countless eons, the harvest had been predictable, the growth and decay of civilizations as regular as the orbits of stars. But this was different. This was an anomaly, and the Great Silence, for the first time in an age, felt a flicker of something akin to interest. The hunt was about to become a great deal more challenging, and infinitely more rewarding.